Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Sports Religion YouTube channel. Today I will be doing a 7-round mock draft for the Green Bay Packers. Going into the season, there wasn't many high hopes regarding a playoff run or a Super Bowl contention or anything like that. However, many of the rookies from last year have turned out to be very good finds in the draft by this front office. Green Bay's never been a front office that's been known to necessarily help their current situation offensively. They often go for building block pieces like offensive linemen. They try to build the defense, with multiple high round picks there, but it never seems to turn out. So, in my opinion, this franchise is in a very pivotal spot going forwards where they have to nail this next draft if they really want to be able to contend next year with Jordan Love on the upswing, as well as all the other young receivers starting to figure things out and become threats all over the field. So with that, let's hop into it. Today we're using the Pro Football Focus mock draft simulator. There's a few simulators out there you can use, but this one is the best one, especially if you paid for the PFF Plus subscription. You do get the full 7 rounds and access to many other things on their website, including pretty much all of the stats for each player. They do a phenomenal job of providing stats on every player in every game at all level of football pretty much. So with that, let's begin this draft. Chicago goes first. Obviously, they're in an interesting situation about whether they keep Justin Fields or move on to Caleb Williams. So that'll be something to monitor in the offseason for Green Bay. Maybe they decide to draft, in anticipation of potentially some new weapons in Chicago, because you're playing that team twice. I mean, these franchises are drafting against each other. They're, constantly trying to one-up one another and stay in control of the North. So Green Bay is really going to have to figure out if that's what they want to do going into next year. So here at pick 19, it kind of puts Green Bay in a bit of a difficult spot. It's kind of no man's land in this draft because it's hard to kind of reach on a player you like here, but it's also kind of, you're on the fringe of the blue chip prospects, to the bottom end of that range of guys. So, PFF lists tackle as a need for Green Bay, which I would have agreed with at the beginning of the year, but look at the way Rasheed Walker's played over the last couple of games. I mean, he's been among the highest graded left tackles the last 3 weeks for Green Bay. And the guy's a 7th round pick that they picked 2 years ago. And, I mean, you're getting incredible value there. You don't have to pay him anything. So why would you kind of risk blowing up that progress that he's made? And he's made a ton of progress because week 2 and 3, he did not look like a starting caliber tackle in the league. But he has only improved each week and faced a plethora of different pass rushers along the way, too. Really done a nice job over on that side. He's not been a liability that he once was, at the beginning of the year, especially that he and Yosh Nijman have been platooning at that position for most of the season as the staff tries to figure out what's best. So for that reason, I don't think that the Packers should take J.C. Latham here. Latham is a Wisconsin kid. He's from Oak Creek, Wisconsin, so that would be kind of a homecoming if they were to draft him. But I just don't know that you'd have Latham, Yosh Nijman, and Rasheed Walker all at left tackle next year. I mean, depth is a good thing, especially at offensive line, but I just don't know that adding another tackle really solves anything right away for Green Bay. It doesn't really add much, right, in the short term to make this roster instantly better. So, for that reason, I think that they should look outside of J.C. Latham, maybe even potentially trading up in this draft. If Gutekunst thinks that there's a prospect that he loves that is going to be available, say at like 13 or 11, then, the Packers have enough picks to trade up. I think they have 11 or 12 picks this year. They have plenty of picks that they could mortgage into, a player that they have on their board that they really want. But, I mean, you have a variety of guys here. Now that we know that Jordan Love is likely going to be the starter going forwards, I mean, why would you move off of him right now after what he's shown you the last, couple of months? it's certainly been up and down, but I think that the positives outweigh the negatives, and he's really a guy that he gets it. He understands what it's like to be in the Matt LaFleur system, and he's willing to kind of push the boundaries on a few of his throws. Like, he's made some big time throws over the last couple of weeks, and that's what you want to see from a young quarterback. So for that reason, I don't think they should look at quarterback here anymore. Like, there's no need at all. So I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. is a phenomenal receiver opposite of Malik Neighbors at LSU. He's more of a jump ball receiver. He's a lot taller, very fast receiver as well. But do they really need receivers right now? Do they need another guy to kind of take snaps away from the other guys they're trying to develop in that room? I just don't think so. And there's always, you can find receivers at any round of the draft. You're not going to have access to the top ones, but still, I mean, you look at Jaden Reed, Wicks, a few of the other guys they really like in that receiving room. They're all they're later round draft picks. So the Packers don't necessarily have to just reach on a guy like that, especially if he's not going to do well, right off the bat. So the guy that's kind of catching my eye here, to me, is Leonard Taylor III. He's a total Packers type. He's what they draft each year. They really go for freak athletes is what Gutekunst and this front office look for. I mean, there's a bunch of good documentation that they only really go for players with relative athletic scores of over 9. We don't know what Leonard Taylor's score is yet, but after the draft or after the combine, we'll have access to those figures, and I'm sure they're going to test tremendously well. He's got incredible get-off for a defensive lineman. His first step is unbelievable. He's got a plethora of pass rush moves he can use from the inside, but the only issue with him is it's not very consistent. He doesn't put it all on tape all of the time. He'll have a few breakout games or really good reps, but then a few bad reps too, and he's not necessarily the dominant run stuffer that I think this defense probably needs, but he's definitely a traits guy that you would look to draft in the first round if you're Green Bay, especially considering that they always seem to pour picks into defense. So I really think that, if you're trying to predict what this front office might do, Leonard Taylor's probably a guy they look at here heavily, and I don't see how you can go wrong with that. I mean, it's adding more in the trenches, more physicality and toughness that this defense desperately needs, and more athleticism. I mean, just look at all of their picks going back to, Rashawn Gary, Jair Alexander, Darnell Savage, Eric Stokes with that speed. They're all freak athletes. They all test extremely well at the combine. So, I mean, that's kind of what the Packers have gone for, is more of an unmolded prospect rather than a complete productive player in college. So, for that reason, I'm going to draft Leonard Taylor III here. And you throw him into that rotation, next to Kenny Clark, next to TJ Slayton. Hope he develops with a few of the other young guys you've drafted, like, Colby Wooden and Carl Brooks. Those guys also have had some really nice reps, but, the more guys you can get in there and kind of rotate through, that'll be good. And it'll also push everyone to be better, too. I think that they haven't quite gotten what they drafted in Devontae Wyatt. He's not put the same type of play on tape that he did at Georgia, which is unfortunate. He's pretty much just a sub-package pass rusher at this point. He has no run stuffing ability whatsoever at this point in time. So, and I mean, that's okay. They gotta have the coaching then to adapt to that style of play and only use him, put him in roles to succeed. So, they haven't really proven they can do that yet. So maybe a guy like Leonard Taylor is what they need, just somebody who could do a little bit of both and, provide another athletic defensive lineman in that room that they really look for. So at pick 40, obviously Shedeur Sanders is on the board. I don't think he's going to go into the draft personally, but PFF has him here at pick 36, which, like if he's smart, he'll go back and try to win as many games as he can with prime time, next year. So, again, here, there's a few tackles on the board. So, Jordan Morgan and Patrick Paul are both high-quality tackles. They're both going to be great pros. I mean, Jordan Morgan's a bit smaller. He's got smaller arms, so a lot of sources project him to be a guard or play inside, but I think he has the footwork and the athleticism to be a tackle at the league. So it just kind of depends which team is going to take him. And Patrick Paul is quite honestly the opposite. He's a mammoth. He's 6'7". He's huge. He's got all the traits you need to kind of deal with those edge rushers that have the ability to counter and get around tackles. So, I mean, either of those guys, if the Packers do take one of them, I wouldn't complain. But, since this is our mock draft, I will not be taking a tackle here. I already explained that Rasheed Walker looks perfectly fine to me. Zach Tom has locked down the other side. He just locked down Danielle Hunter this last week. Did a good job on TJ Watt. All the edge rushers he's faced, he's really done a nice job. You can't even tell that, that anybody's coming around that corner game after game. So, A.D. Mitchell, really athletic receiver. They kind of already have that in the room with Christian Watson. So I just don't, that's basically drafting another Christian Watson who has 2 less years of experience, and I don't know if the Packers would do that. The guy that I really want at this position is TJ Tampa out of Iowa State. I can't say enough good things about this guy. He is phenomenal. I mean, he's 6'2". He's got immense size as a corner. He's going to be able to handle a lot of the receivers with length, and I believe he was also a wrestler in high school, so he's got all sorts of experience, with leverage and kind of ability to understand an opponent in one-on-one situations. And Pete Carroll and the Seahawks do a great job of identifying guys that have played other sports in their past, and they love that. I mean, the Seahawks have made a living out of drafting guys who are, have extensive athletic backgrounds. So why can't the Packers do the same thing here? I mean, TJ Tampa, he's just another guy from Iowa, a long line of quality players from Iowa State. I mean, they're not really a school that produces quantity in the NFL, but for the guys they do, they're very high quality. I mean, you look at Breece Hall, you look at Hakeem Butler, you look at Brock Purdy, you look at Will McDonald, all of these guys are, they seem to have one guy a year who can be in the first 2 rounds and is a quality player. You know what you're getting right away. They had Xavier Hutchinson too, a receiver. And they've got a few other receivers coming up in the pipeline, Jaden Higgins and Noel as well. So, I mean, Iowa State's, they produce quality guys. So I have no worry about TJ Tampa being, competing against poor competition or anything like that. He's definitely from a quality Power 5 program and, would fit in nicely in an NFL team. And he's kind of got that, that dog mentality that you look for in a corner. I mean, in all of his matchups, he wants to be on top. He wants to win. And, I think he'd be a great ad for the secondary. I mean, you have Jair Alexander coming back. Carrington Valentine and Corey Ballantyne have both been playing extremely well for this team. But they are, young guys. And to me, you can never have enough corners until, you kind of just got to keep trying until you hit one. And I don't know if Eric Stokes is really working out for this team. I mean, I love his speed and his athleticism. That's why the Packers drafted him. But if you can't stay on the field, then, I mean, what purpose are you serving for this, this roster and this defense? So for me, it's a no-brainer. Here you go, TJ Tampa, especially with teams after this 40th pick that are in desperate need of corners, like Washington, Atlanta. I mean, the Vikings always draft corners early. The Raiders, the Eagles need corner help. Their corner room is aging fast. So, if the Packers don't take TJ Tampa here, he's going to get taken right away. I mean, there's so many other teams that would happily take a high-quality corner in the second round. And although it's a bit of a reach by, the PFF simulator here, I don't think it's a reach at all based on the fact that other teams will be, waiting to draft that guy. So with that, the Packers get an extremely high-quality addition to their secondary, and he'll fit in nicely with whatever they decide to do. So here we have Xavier Legette at the top of the board, which would be a nice pick. Right now he's totally a jump ball receiver, and you look around the NFL, and there's not a lot of guys that succeed at that, without any nuance to their game. DK Metcalf's really the only receiver who's just kind of a flat out, I'm going to dominate you because I'm bigger, faster, stronger. I mean, the corners in the NFL are just too good for that. They understand, they've seen all sorts of different plays and different types of play styles that, you just don't see in college. So if you don't have any nuance to your game as a receiver, then that's a little concerning. But I think Xavier Legette is a quality, college player. He is also massive. He's very similar size to DK. So it'll be interesting to see how he tests at the combine and what kind of interest he draws. I think he'd be a better fit for a team like the Chiefs that just really needs an influx of receiving talent. But, there's a few other interesting guys here. Like Edgerrin Cooper, linebacker from Texas A&M, is a very good pass rusher for them. Texas A&M had one of the best pass rushes in the country. They really racked up the stats this year. He was a large part of that. They'd always bring him through the gap, try to run downhill and attack the running lanes, try to disrupt the quarterback. And so, he could be a viable option to add to this defense. He's definitely an aggressive linebacker. It's just, there might be other linebackers down the road that the Packers could also look at and, draft more of a premium position here. J.J. McCarthy's here, but we don't need quarterbacks. Jonah Ellis, extremely productive pass rusher at Utah. He's 6 feet tall, so he's really small for an edge rusher. But I personally think that he's going back to Utah based on what I've kind of been reading and judging by how he kind of had some injuries to deal with at the end of the year. He might want to put more on tape and come back. I think he had 14 sacks this year, though, which is really impressive. Maybe a guy the Packers would keep an eye on in the future, but they really just don't draft smaller linemen like that. They're about size, strength, speed, athleticism. So that'll be an interesting thing to kind of look at here. So one thing that I see here is it's a lot of receivers that, they're very similar body types to what the Packers kind of already have in their room and are already trying to develop. So, again, I just don't know that will necessarily, the Packers will necessarily want to look that way in the second round. And so, for that reason, I do think that going with, a guy like Jackson Powers Johnson would be huge for this line because Josh Myers is just flat out a liability. He gets pushed around every snap. I just don't know what's really going on there because they drafted him instead of Creed Humphrey in that draft, and that's turning out to be a very questionable decision. He missed a ton of time with some finger injury his rookie year that really derailed things early on, but he just hasn't really looked crazy, athletic or particularly good at getting downfield and getting to the second level, and blocking those linebackers that so often are good at stopping the run. So I have no problem with them taking a center here, especially with Powers Johnson putting a lot of good stuff on tape this year at Oregon. That Oregon line was very underrated and it was not talked about that much. But it kept Bo Nix on his feet all season. And there's some good pass rushers in the Pac-12. So I am not opposed at all to drafting Powers Johnson here, a guy with plenty of experience at a great program in Oregon. They run the ball just as much as they throw the ball, so he's got pass protection and run blocking experience. And at the very least, it kind of lights a fire in that center room about, competition and one-upping one another, and trying to get, maybe he and Josh Myers can kind of have this competition, and force each other to be better, and then the best man wins. So I think that is a great pick for the Packers there, and it adds some valuable depth to the front of the offensive line right in that center position. So now here is a position where I would take a tackle because Kingsley Suamataia is on the board, and as you can see, his average drafted position is 68.3. and we're at pick 83. So that would be incredible value for a tackle that has a lot of starting experience here. And this is a spot where I would be comfortable taking a tackle, further down the board like this. And, you're getting a lot of value for that pick. Like, he's projected to go much higher than this, and you're getting him here. That's a great thing for the Packers, and maybe he can be, a young guy that you can develop into the future and provide valuable depth. So I'm going to take that here. That's also a bit of a preventative measure from other teams drafting him. Sometimes you draft so that another team doesn't get a good tackle. Even if you don't necessarily need one, you can never have enough tackles. So I am perfectly okay with that pick here. Let's see. So we're at 88. I see Blake Corum here. The Packers desperately need to figure out something at the running back position going forwards. They have great short-term solutions in A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, but Dillon's contract is up after this year, and Aaron Jones's cap hit is pretty large going forward, so I'm not totally sure what the Packers decide to do with either of them. So I think the safest thing to do is draft a young running back, get a guy into that room who could potentially provide some young speed, hopefully health too, because both of these guys have been a little bit banged up. Aaron Jones especially has been banged up this season. So yeah, here there's a couple of options. Trey Benson, Donovan Edwards, and Blake Corum are all available. They're all a bit of a reach, but I just don't really like any. We already drafted a center. Johnny Wilson is an absolute tree at receiver. He's 6'7" as a receiver, which is unbelievable, but he's another guy that's similar to Xavier Legette, and there's not that much nuance to his game. He's just a really freakishly tall guy who's going to be a size mismatch, but can he get away from NFL corners? That'll remain to be seen, and I just don't know that really helps the Packers. Packers do need safety, so Tyke Smith could be chosen here, but the Packers have never shown they want to draft a safety this high. They either take, they sign free agents on lower dollar or take a guy in the 7th round like Anthony Johnson last year. So I just don't think there's any realm of possibility that the Packers draft a safety this high. They've just never shown any, they drafted Darnell Savage a few years back, but since that time, have they really looked into the draft in that way? So, from that perspective, I will not be taking Tyke Smith here. But back to the running backs. Blake Corum's certainly the most explosive one of the bunch here. He's gotten the most, kind of run at Michigan, but he's very small. He's 5'8", I believe. So, do the Packers want a running back that small? They really look at A.J. Dillon. They drafted him, and he's an absolute house. You're scared to tackle that guy, and that's kind of what the Packers want. If they're going to draft another running back, they want a big physical guy. And so I think I tend to lean towards Donovan Edwards for that reason. He's a much bigger back. He's got the breakaway speed that you expect from a running back who's been given a lot of carries, but he didn't really have the production this year, which is kind of something that's been talked about a lot, is that his kind of runs just seem to get bottled up a lot more. So I don't know, it's kind of hard. It's kind of a toss-up between these two guys. They're both phenomenal running backs, and I think both of them are above Trey Benson in terms of rankings. But if I'm thinking in the lens of the Packers, I would much be leaning towards Donovan Edwards here. He's more physically gifted than Blake Corum is. And I think just a better overall back. He's more balanced out among his traits versus, his production. And I think that he's better than any of the other RB3s that the Packers would have if they brought A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones back. He would be better than Patrick Taylor. He would be better than Emmanuel Wilson. He would be better than Lou Nichols. All of these guys. He'd be better than Kenyon Drake right away in the league. So I think just adding Donovan Edwards here would be nothing but advantageous to the Packers and provide them with, a bit more flash and youth on the offensive side of things. So I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest, because Edwards he's going to be a good pro. Just watch the years that he's had at Michigan. It's been really fun to watch him and Blake Corum kind of tandem that backfield and go about things that way. So here I see a guy that I would very much like the Packers to draft, and that's Jaden Hicks out of Washington State. Just watch any Washington State game this year, and you'll see this guy flying all over the field. I mean, he racks up tackles like nobody else on that defense. Really is a vocal guy too. He'll deliver a huge hit and get up and be in the guy's face about the play he just made, and that's what the Packers need. They need some smash mouth football. They need a guy who's loud and is going to make a play and then let you know he made a play. So to me, it's a no-brainer here. It fulfills a need. Like, they need a star safety in that room desperately. I don't think they should bring Darnell Savage back. He's just been too banged up and inconsistent and really struggled with being a ball hawk at times. He just flat out misses more interceptions than he catches, which is something that needs to be resolved. Jonathan Owens has been a nice find in free agency, but will they bring him back or not? You never know with the way things are. So for me, it's a no-brainer here. You don't really need defensive line after we took Leonard Taylor in the first round. Jalen Milroe's not going to be in the draft this year. There's a few other tackles here as well, but Jaden Hicks is the one that fulfills a need in this spot, and in the fourth round, you're kind of getting him right at his draft value, so I don't see any problems with that at all. And it finally shows that the Packers want to invest in the back end of this defense and kind of grow the team in that regard and get some more speed and athleticism in that spot. So here at 135, Michael Hall is actually still on the board, which is interesting. He again, maybe the Packers move on him and take him if he's available here because of the draft value, but he also is a lot smaller of a defensive lineman. He's more of a finesse guy, rather than a power guy, and I don't know if that helps the Packers solve their run defense right away. So, there's a few other guys here that are kind of interesting. The Packers don't really need a center because we just drafted Powers Johnson, and we have Josh Myers in there as well. And so I would kind of like to see them keep attacking the interior of this offensive line. John Runyon's really struggled this year. I know the coaching staff seems to really like him, but he's a penalty machine, and he's kind of gets tipped over by, pretty much any defensive lineman can get by him. So he's been platooning with Sean Ryan a lot, but I would much rather them draft another body there to kind of get the physicality of that position up. If you want to have a good run game for Jordan Love, you got to have road graders up front that are just going to attack the defense, climb to the next level. And you also need guys that can move around and pull on certain plays and stay in their spot in other plays. So I'm going to go with Donovan Jackson here. He's been an anchor of the Ohio State offensive line through C.J. Stroud's career and even last year when Kyle McCord was the quarterback. So you're getting a guy who's played in a high-profile offense for many years, played with a high degree of physicality against Big Ten defensive lines, and that's something the Packers need, just more physicality, more athleticism, more of that dog mentality up front, and it absolutely benefits them to have more competition for that position. The more guys that are fighting for one spot, it only boosts the entire morale of the room when you have everybody kind of fighting for spaces on the roster like that. So here we've got, again, eventually they'll update this. The guys that aren't coming back won't be in here. Like Cameron Ward's not going to be in the draft anymore. He is going to be in the draft, but I think he's still looking in the transfer portal at stuff. So you never know if he'll actually be here or not. And so this kind of starts the beginning of a lot of picks for the Packers. They have a lot of picks in a row here. So they're going to have some opportunities to do stuff. Maybe they trade some of these picks to go up and get another, second or third round pick. It'll only be determined closer to the draft what they decide with their, with their needs and stuff. So, the guy I'm going to take here is Jordan Burch from Oregon. This guy he played opposite of Brandon Dorlus, who is their other phenomenal edge player. But he gets a lot less attention because, Dorlus is the stud of that line, which makes sense. But Jordan Burch is a massive guy. He's 6'7" as well and has huge arms, like really long arms. And he was kind of a problem for tackles on that side to defend all year. I believe he transferred in from another school. So he might be a bit of an older prospect, which the Packers have shown they like younger guys. But I think if you're looking for traits that, difference-making traits, Jordan Burch definitely has it and would be a great addition to the edge room, especially with Preston Smith aging. Rashawn Gary's had some injury stuff going on, and it's hard to tell right now if it's still affecting him or not. But you definitely need more pass rushers, more physicality there, and more mismatches on that front seven. So for me, I would go Jordan Burch there all day. You can never have enough of those guys that create mismatches like that. So here we have, Julian Fleming's going. He just transferred to Penn State, so he's not going to be in the draft this year. There's a lot of interesting guys here. This is kind of the part of the draft where you just throw a dart at the dartboard and see what you get. Maybe you can get some value. Maybe, you can get a guy who pushes for a roster spot. It's just becoming more and more important to be able to hit on these guys because the quality of players are getting better each and every year. So I think the guy here that we'd have to take at 217 would be Jabbar Muhammad because, again, you want to kind of stock this corner room as much as you can. Get some younger guys in there. Get guys with that mentality of wanting to improve upon themselves and kind of fight each other for roster spots. And Muhammad's kind of been a guy who's come on in the last few weeks. Like, he's a part of a Washington defense that gives up a lot of yards, but he is also their best corner. He's become their best corner, and Washington has produced no shortage of corners over the last couple of years. They've shown they're a great college at producing defensive back talent. So I don't have any problem with the Packers taking another corner here and, just adding to that room overall and having them develop alongside the other young guys. Especially we already drafted TJ Tampa earlier on. So I think you can't hurt to draft another corner and just kind of get as many guys in that room as you possibly can. So, it's kind of, there's a lot of toss-ups here, a lot of guys that are going back. This is actually where I would like to take a linebacker, I think. Curtis Jacobs out of Penn State's a really impressive linebacker. Penn State's had no shortage of good linebackers either the last couple of years. They had Brandon Bell go out a few years ago. He plays next to Abdul Carter right now, who's one of the best players who's not draft eligible. So in the 2025 draft, Abdul Carter's certainly going to be on everybody's board. But the guy that kind of gets overlooked in all that is Curtis Jacobs, who in 2021 had a phenomenal freshman year. You could see the speed and the hustle that he plays with, and even in a loaded linebacker room like Penn State had that year. They had a bunch of good players on that defense, like Jaquan Brisker, Arnold Ebiketie, Joey Porter Jr., Kalen King, Kobe King, stuff like that. So, Curtis Jacobs really stands out whenever you watch a Penn State game, and he's not really talked about that much as a crazy prospect. But I think if you want to add a linebacker into this room and maybe one up Eric Wilson or Isaiah McDuffie, and then kind of learn behind Devondre Campbell, who I think might be on his way out after this contract is over. there's no better time than right now to kind of test that out and see what you have. So for me, it's a no-brainer to go with Curtis Jacobs right there in that position. And maybe you end up with a great tandem of linebackers in Quay Walker and him, going forward. Two guys on similar timelines in the middle of that defense. And you just kind of build for the future with that, trying to load up that defense and get talent in each room that would fit whatever scheme they decide to have going forwards. So the Packers are down to their last pick in the draft here. It's a lot of late round guys that I think are probably going back to college. It's just kind of early on in the process to tell like who's actually going to be in the draft here. But I think that I would go back to the offensive line or maybe pick another edge rusher, just kind of take a shot in the dark and see what you can get. So a guy that I like here, ZTF, he's opposite Braylon Trice at Washington. And I think that he's a guy who could probably come back and put more on tape, but if he is in the draft, he's very unproven, he's very raw, and the Packers have shown they like taking shots on those guys just based on their athleticism alone. So for that reason, I'm going to draft him here, and that gives us Jordan Burch and ZTF in the same draft. You get two edge rushers with a lot of experience, not necessarily a lot of production, but I mean, those are guys that could be building blocks in the future, especially with Van Ness developing alongside of Rashawn Gary and Enagbare as well in that room. Just keep seeing what you can get out of each of those drafts. So yeah, that concludes our draft. Overall, I think very good draft. PFF disagrees clearly because they put a lot of weight on positional value as well as needs, and I didn't necessarily follow their strict list of needs in this draft, but I was kind of bouncing in between trying to predict what I think the front office would do in combination with my own assessment of these players. And I really think the Packers like what they have at offense, at the offensive skill positions. I think they love their receivers. They've all been better than expected. Typical growing pains with them. I mean, there's a few drops here and there, but I think they really like what they have there and what they've kind of found and discovered. And clearly Jordan Love, I mean, he's their guy going forward. So it's not necessarily the most impressive draft in that terms if you're looking for, like a crazy receiver, crazy tight end, whatever. This is definitely going to be more of a building block draft, kind of add some depth in key places, add some physicality in key places, and try to bolster things. Because if you can do that, you'll have a really special roster with this team. They're all going to pop at once, and it's going to be really hard for the rest of the league to deal with. So I think probably my favorite pick from this entire thing is TJ Tampa. I mean, he quite honestly could be my favorite corner in the draft as well. I'm not taking anything away from Nate Wiggins or Cooper DeJean or a few of the other guys, Kalen King, a few of the other guys in this draft, but TJ Tampa is extremely underrated. He's not talked about that much in this corner class, and he's a guy, if the Packers don't get him, whoever gets him is getting a phenomenal pro who's going to play for a long time in the NFL. I don't know how else to say it. So I would really hope the Packers choose him there because he's going to be a phenomenal player wherever he goes. Just watch the tape. Don't take my word for it. I mean, he is an incredible prospect. And I think that, I'm happy with drafting a center, drafting a guard, drafting a tackle at the positions I took them because it just provides more depth at those positions and, more ability for the Packers to kind of decide what their identity is. I think this team sometimes lacks a sense of physicality or a sense of identity, what they want to do offensively in the trenches, how they want to move guys there or, kind of manipulate things. So, but yeah, Thanks for tuning into this episode. We might fire up a few more mock drafts when we get closer to the draft and learn more about what teams could potentially want to trade with the Packers, or if the Packers are looking to trade up themselves. So, yeah, stay tuned for that.